Hello and welcome to another episode of the Terry McGriff Show. Wow, man, great Super Bowl week we just had. Just want to be happy that we got through the week so far after this post Super Bowl and this post NFL season. But I want to first start out by bringing in my illustrious co-host, Andre L. Sullivan, sitting there in those great iHeart studios. How's it going, Andre?
I'm doing well, man. It's a great day. Sun is shining. I'm not dead. I'm good.
Yeah, we're still waiting on the Bugatti, but we'll get that sooner or later. Hey, if you'd have bet on the Bucks, you might have been able to get it this week.
Such is life.
Yeah, such is life, man. Let me tell you, it's been a great week so far. I had a good time during the Super Bowl. Spent it with a buddy and two, um, and some friends. Um, what I want to start before I get the show was first acknowledging our great partners, Shikar, Team Sportswear Direct, and Women's Tackle Football League, Laces Out, and also Watch Game Film. But one of the main things I wanted to do is just take a moment before we got going in this show. I wanted to really talk about somebody who really I found out on, I think Monday right after Super Bowl, the great Marty Shottenhiemer passed away. Um, I grew up when he was a coach, and he coached in the NFL for 20 years, 21 years. He was a head coach, um, and really he was one of the he closed. When I really got him to start getting into football, he was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and used to love his when the NFL films would do all the little sound takes on him. He had these great sayings. There's a gleam in. He was with the Chargers hard, all these type of things. He had a great way of inspiring players to do their best. Unfortunately, it took him going into another league before he finally won a championship, but he always won wherever he was at. And I really that one was first of all, I heard he was sick, but I didn't know he had Alzheimer's. But he was one of my favorite coaches. He never won the Super Bowl, but he was always always in the middle of the mix for playoffs and stuff. So I really enjoyed the war. Listening to him, I actually seen some of the stuff where he was doing some film study, and I learned a lot about him. I know his son was a Florida Gator. Now I think he's actually coaching in Jacksonville, Brian Schottenheimer. So I'd like to send my condolences out to to the family and all the people that have been associated with the great Marty Schottenheimer, and rest in heaven for that man. He's going to be sorely missed in the game. So I just wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to him, because I really, really, he was one of my inspirations for actually getting into coaching. I don't know if you knew much about him, but
I mean, other than a few, when you mention coaches, and more importantly, when you mention offensive coaches and changing the game, Marty is one of the names that came up. So, like you said, Brian Schottenheimer, he's actually the passing coordinator for the offense for the Jacksonville Jaguars now. So, again, condolences to his family as they deal with this loss.
Yeah, want to just reach out to that note, like the Cleveland Browns, the Chargers family, all those people that he coached for back in the day, and I think the Redskins also, or the Washington football team. So want to get and talk about him for a little bit, give him an acknowledgement. Even though we've lost quite a few, sports stars and celebrities already in this year, that's just life. Goes on, and you just want to take a minute to acknowledge him. Well, let's get into something a little bit lighter. This Super Bowl, wow, man, was it not what we expected? It was entertaining. I will say that it was entertaining. I started kind of really admiring the game plan that the Buccaneers put in place. We spoke about that. I kind of was like I told you, I was kind of leaning toward that the Buccaneers, as we were talking last week's episode, due to the fact that they had three of their starting linemen out, especially when the center was down. I'm like, whoa, that's going to cause that's some problems. That, to me, that was a big red flag. You kind of gave Mahomes some extra credit that, with his mobility, that he'd be able to help get out of pockets. And boy, did he make some miraculous throws on some of the plays that he was able to get out. Unfortunately, those receivers weren't able to come down with the ball, but he did some stuff to get them balls out of there and give them guys a chance. I thought that was really remarkable, and it shows his talent. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game plan was masterful. First of all, to be that physically dominant on both lines of scrimmage, offensive line and defensive line, was the key to the game. They had Mahomes on the run defensively all game long. I don't think he's ever been that uncomfortable in the game in his NFL career. Just another key of why you definitely need great offensive line play to be really good in this league. And I guess when those guys come back for the 2021 season, those guys are probably going to get a lot more love when they show, the time that they're going to be able to give Mahomes next year. And I'm sure he's going to be, they'll be right back in the mix again, if not back in the Super Bowl. They're my AFC favorite already. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if there is a rematch. So we'll see how it works.
I'm not going to be that gun ho, but I will say this, and I know a lot of people are going to just disagree with me, and I'm totally okay with that. I'm the controversial one on this show. But the tape says one thing. The stats say something totally different. And if you look at the tape and you just totally ignore the stats, it looked ugly. You know what I mean? It did. I don't have another a thesaurus near me to pick another word for ugly, but yeah, it just looked ugly, And we hadn't seen an offensive line dominated like that since the Seahawks played the Broncos in New York. And what was interesting about it was, and that's why I say the tape tells a different story than the stats do, because the stats stood at 26 for 49, 270 yards for Pat Mahomes. And on the other side of the ball, it was only 21 out of 29, 201 yards, and 3 touchdowns for Tom Brady. So I'm a big, I'm a big person that doesn't really always pays attention to stats.
Mm-hmm.
But what that does tell me is that they weren't that far apart. The thing that the stats doesn't show you is productivity. And the way that Tampa Bay controlled the clock and field was why I say the tape just made it look ugly. And time of possession honestly wasn't that unequal. It's just the fact of where you start the ball. I don't think a lot of people understand how offense can put a defense in a bad position. I think that if I'm a coach, I show that to my team to tell you my offense can't hurt my defense. I don't think people understand. I think now people understand, especially if you're a high school player going to college, how important the trenches are to a game. And I think on top of that, you understand how important a linebacking core in coverage, not in the rush game, but in coverage matters to a game. Because what we saw initially, the middle of the field, they gave a few little dinks and dives here and there. But those 3 linebackers, for the most part, were covering your all-stars. They were the cheetah had no way to get open in the middle like he usually like he's had all season, because the linebackers took 3 steps back instead of the normal 2 to play zone. And Kelsey had to fight for his life to get open because Devin White was jamming him as soon as he stepped off the line. And then on top of that, you can't, your boy, only got 64 yards for 9 carries.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think we saw a game like that in a while where a defense basically set the tone from jump, even though they started on offense.
Mm-hmm.
And so kudos to Todd Bowles. Oh my God. Like, wow. just wow. I really just want to shake the man's hand because the game plan that he put together. I mean, granted, he has a few stars on that defense, but there's nobody that's just like, oh my God, because at the end of the day, he set it up as a team defense,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of those things. And like as coaches, we tell our players all the time, if you do your job, somebody else can do theirs. And I know I probably went on a rant. I apologize, but yeah, it's just that was a masterful plan. I mean, Tom Brady's gonna get the praise that he deserves. He played a hell of a game. I will never be able to take any away from QB12, but that defense that we saw was literally filmed on how you play against somebody who's trying to be fast paced against you, somebody who's trying to air it out against you, somebody who's trying to run it against you. That's the film you show your students, your young athletes, your college players on how to get it done.
I totally agree 100%. And like I said with last week's show, one of the keys to me was Vita Vea when he came back for the NFC Championship game. I told you I thought he was going to be key to this defense because he frees up Ndamukong Suh on the inside to wreak havoc. Now you can't just try to slide to the two defensive ends that the Buccaneers had, and Shaq Barrett and JPP. They actually did a lot of rotation. They actually put Vita Vea out at an end on a couple of occasions just to him to take the tackle and push him back into the quarterback so that they wouldn't have any inside movement. They did a lot of different tactics against Mahomes to make him uncomfortable. He got to the point where he was actually running for his life and not even looking downfield on some of his throws. He was looking behind him to see if anybody was chasing him before he looked downfield. That's how they had him flustered. And that was just, once again, Todd Bowles did a masterful job. I 100% agree with you on that. But those guys were hungry to get after him. And there's textbook game planning against an offense like that. And Levante David, you got to give him his credit along with the rest of the linebacking core. They did a great job on Kelsey and anybody that's doing underneath stuff. And they made a conscious decision. We are going to double Tyreek Hill regardless where he goes. And he was really not a factor. The only reason they was able to get to the ball to him is on the quick short passes, basically little quick passes to get him the ball in his hand. But the open field tackling by the defensive backs also for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was just spot on. I mean, open field tackle. I mean, this whole game plan, you just take this film if you're a defensive coach and just put it as this is how to play defense. If you want to dominate somebody, did you in all three phases, in all three areas of your defense, defensive line, linebacker, and defensive back, this is how you play a game. And you took a team that was one of the all-time greats at scoring on offense, and you totally shut them down. You didn't shut them out, but you shut them down. I mean, the majority of his passing yards came within the fourth quarter. If I'm not mistaken, it was like 165 of his 200-something yards were in the fourth quarter when the game was already over. And they were basically giving him yards just to eat the clock up. Masterful. The other thing I want to give kudos to is Byron Leftwich, what he did in his game planning far as being able to stick with the run. A lot of times you get caught up in trying to have quarterback go tit for tat with the other team's quarterback to try to make it. But he kept the game balanced, especially in the first drive, because some of the stuff that he did to set up Gronk with running the ball. And then it was able to free up Fournette on his long touchdown run by being dedicated to him. They were able, their game plan put pressure on the Kansas City defense because Kansas City was looking over when they were sitting on the bench watching Mahomes get just harassed, thinking, Lord, if we don't stop Tampa Bay, we don't have a chance because we don't know how many points they're going to score because it's not like our normal game where they're going to be able to come out here and know that they're going to get a couple of quick strikes for touchdown. They didn't have that belief, and you can see it in the third quarter. You can see it in their body language. They're like, man, I don't know if we're gonna be able to pull this out. We need to stop. We need to do something. We need to get some turnovers ourselves. And they had a lot of bad penalties, especially in the first half, that cost them plays that kept the Buccaneers on the field, which able to get them some touchdowns. And giving up those runs, I think Fournette averaged like 5 yards a carry. You know, all the backs had pretty much good success running the ball. So the offensive line play did their job on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They did a good job running the ball. They were good physically. They got a lot of good skirmishes because the Kansas City defense started getting frustrated in what was going up front, and knowing that they don't know if they were going to be able to match score for score with the Tampa Bay offense. So masterful game all around. Bruce Arians, I'm glad he got his ring. You know, it's one of the coaches that well deserved it. Like I said before, one of the most open-minded coaches out there with the diversity on that staff and in that whole building. Kudos to them. Congratulations to the Buccaneers. And, you know, everybody pretty much, they got a lot of free agents leaving, but most of those guys seem like they're going to come back. We'll see how much money will be available for these guys. So I'm interested to see what they do going forward, but congratulations to them. So, well, let's go on into our next subject. Speaking of quarterback play, you know, well, this week it's been a lot of different news. We already know about the trade between the Detroit Lions and the LA Rams, where they basically swapped quarterbacks in draft picks. The Deshaun Watson discussion. Then there's some more news came out today about the president resigning because his unhappiness with the Texans organization. And there's talk about some other great players having their input on what's going on in the building. So as it seems right now, I would not be surprised if Deshaun Watson isn't traded before the draft. There's a lot of other quarterback movement. They're talking about Dak Prescott. You know, he possibly moving on from Dallas. And there's been some rumors for people wanting to make trades for surprisingly Marcus Mariota with the Raiders. So there's going to be a lot of different issues, not to mention that the Steelers are in negotiations right now. We're trying to renegotiate Ben Roethlisberger's contract. So I would not be surprised, along with Carson Wentz being shopped right now to the Colts. To see who's where by the time next season is going to be really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised as almost half the league has different quarterbacks. I'm not just talking about the draft, but just different veteran quarterbacks than what I've seen. So I want to get your take on that.
I mean, it's an interesting right now dynamic for quarterbacks right now. Being the quarterback, there's a lot of quarterbacks that can be drafted here in a few months. But as I'm going down the list, there's not a lot of free agent quarterbacks that can be picked up. Now, granted, it has come out that the Eagles are open for trades with the anybody for Carson Wentz. But even more interesting, the Washington football team only has one quarterback under contract right now, and that's Alex Smith. The New England Patriots only have one quarterback on the contract right now, and that's Jason Stidham. And so those two teams in particular, the Chicago Bears only have one quarterback on the contract, and that's the former Jaguar Nick Foles. And so you got Indianapolis, who only has one quarterback on the contract.
They have two. They have the rookie. Jacob
have
Eason.
One. They have one.
Okay.
Jacob Eason is that one.
Okay.
And so it's just interesting with people like Cam Newton, who will probably be floating around. You got, Marcus Mariota. Who wants to hire Marcus Mariota as a quarterback still baffles me. But that's a personal opinion. But, this is a very heavy quarterback draft. With the way things are set up right now, if just putting myself in the shoes of many GMs in the NFL, I don't know if I want to kind of spend that money on a free agent quarterback, even somebody like Cam Newton, who, by all intents and purposes is still a very, very valuable quarterback for any NFL team. But there are a lot of young cats coming out of college right now. And there is a true changing of the guard in the NFL. People aren't looking for Peyton Manning's and Drew Brees and, for that point, Tom Brady's anymore. They're looking for your Lamar Jacksons, your Patrick Mahomes, and your Russell Wilsons. And so I can't speak on how, any particular GM will move, but the next 2 months, as far as quarterbacks are concerned, will be very interesting because this draft board is stocked. It's stocked. And even to the point where your guy out of Clemson is getting ready to have surgery. And if that surgery doesn't come out well, literally the whole board just switched for everyone. And so, like I said, it'll be interesting to see the next 2 months play out for anybody who plays the position, trying to play it at a high level in the NFL.
Well, speaking on that, he is Trevor Lawrence is going to have a workout here this week for the Jaguars and all the other and the surgery is on his non-throwing arm, so there's not any major concern about him not being able to pass the ball. It's just they just want to make sure that gets cleaned up because he didn't do it right at the end of the season. For whatever reason, I don't know. That seems to happen a lot in football right now. The guys waiting seem like they wait till the last minute to get stuff done. I don't know. Maybe needed to wait for clearance or something. But there is, like you said, I do agree with you. There is a lot of quarterback movement. There's a lot of free agent movement. I even know that they're talking about that New Orleans. They're knowing that Drew Brees is going to retire, but between the two quarterbacks still left on their roster, they're not looking. They're saying is to move on to anybody. There's going to be between one of those two guys that takes over from there. But I wouldn't be surprised also that they draft someone. Interesting, with where the draft prospect is as far as the quarterback right now. Somebody like the young man out of North Dakota State, Trey Lance, is kind of sliding down the board behind somebody like Mac Jones. It's like the top 5-6 quarterbacks because he didn't play in the fall. Interesting what he does here because I think their season starts in a couple of weeks. If he comes out on fire and he does it, will he fly back up there because he was one of the big names before the season started. And obviously because he didn't play, people and the play of the other guys, his name is really started the fall. But he is one of those athletes that really can move around. He just didn't have a lot of tape right now. So once he gets some more film out there, I want to see what people's dynamic on him will be. The kid from BYU, Wilson, just kind of came out of nowhere with the season that he had this year and slid to supposedly most people's number 2 slot. Everybody is a far second, obviously, to Trevor Lawrence because of his ability and stuff like that, his pedigree. But there is a lot of quarterbacks that you can win with, and that's coming out in this draft. And I mean, you take it that's probably going to be later in the draft. I can't think of the young man's name; it just totally escaped me as I was thinking about it. But he was supposed to transfer to Georgia from Wake Forest. He didn't. He played in the Senior Bowl, and you're looking at there's tons of other guys that we don't really know their names because they weren't the marquee guys. But those guys, once you get in somebody's camp, it always seems to be one. We always have this one guy. Well, who is this guy? Nobody really knew about him. And then he gets in the camp, and plays really well and works his way up a depth chart. So it's going to be a changing of the guard. Like you said, people are not getting away from the statues and they want more mobile quarterbacks, which is the reason, once again, Mariota is spinning to get some interest out there because of his mobility. And some of these coaches think, well, I can coach this guy, Obviously that you're going to have somebody there's going to be some teams out there with some interest in Trubisky. Teams are out there got interest in Carson Wentz right now. So if you got some mobility and you had any type of success at this level, people are going to give you a chance. So it's going to be interesting to see how these guys move around. And with the draft, I'm just, as we're talking right now, the fact that Dak Prescott is still, they still haven't really solidified their situation in Dallas with him speaks volumes of what's going on in the NFL. I mean, obviously the fact that the Steelers have wanting to renegotiate Roethlisberger's contract. He's not as mobile as the other guys, but he is big and mobile. So you want those guys, and with his experience, if they figure he probably play maybe 1 or 2 more years, and then they'll be working on his successor. So the interesting part of this our topic right now is looking at what happens in the coming weeks and months, because I think it's going to really change the dynamic of what goes on in the NFL. It might be some teams that come out of nowhere that, because of the quarterback change, that will affect the way their fortunes. I mean, the development of Buffalo's quarterback with his mobility and where he able to run, and then he developed in the passing game, propelled Buffalo to the AFC Championship game when really people didn't really see them. They saw them as a good team, but they didn't see them being that good. So that's, I think, one of the things is that really spurred the trade between Detroit and LA, because I think Detroit was more willing to get rid of Matt Stafford than the Rams were willing to. So that's why they made that happen. Even though I think the Rams gave up far too much for Matt Stafford, in my opinion. So his mobility. I mean, think about it. Blaine Gabbert still has a job because he's mobile. He's mobile, even a little bit more mobile, and he's back up. So we'll see how this goes, and I'm interested as we go and just up to the draft and beyond to see how it goes. Well, speaking of the draft, I wanted to kind of talk about that. Let's get started. I had my idea of where this thing was going. Everybody knows that, unless the Jaguars just do something idiotic that,
don't use the word idiotic, because if they don't draft Trevor Lawrence, I'll be the happiest person in Jacksonville, Florida.
But everybody knows that's the pick. If they don't,
everybody, we can't use the term everybody, because I'm sitting here saying
most people thinking, including myself, that's the right choice. You need a quarterback. He's the best one on the board right now. Get him. You know what I mean? Unless somebody gives you a great deal and maybe pick up Deshaun Watson, something like that. I get it. I mean, myself, I would rather go with him than even anybody that's one of those guys that are proven, because of the money factor. I mean, you restrict yourself when you're paying all these guys that kind of money, and you already need a whole lot of help on the rest of your roster. So if you can get a good quarterback and don't have to pay him a whole lot in his first few years, i.e. the Seattle Seahawks, when you lucked into a good quarterback that can get you over the hump, and you can spend money in other areas, that really helps you. And because once you start paying those quarterbacks that money, you're really limiting your roster. Take the Green Bay Packers. They got a high top quarterback, and they really can't really spend money in other areas. Detroit was the same way. The Rams kind of mortgaged their future with paying for their quarterback. When that happens, that's why you're doing that. That's one of the reasons Dallas is not really trying to pay long-term big money to Dak, because it does restrict you when you paying all those guys a lot of money. Anyway, outside of that, I'm really interested to see where this draft goes. Obviously, the Jets were picking number 2. They can go a multitude of ways if they feel like they've got their quarterback, because they did draft him a couple years ago. I would see them drafting one of the other guys, but those mock drafts by some of these so-called experts have gone so many different ways right now. Who knows? I can put out a mock and it'll be just as successful as anybody else. And I might do one, but just still thinking about what I want to do. The interesting part of it is that, with the quarterback changing of the guards and all this switching, how is that going to affect most people's draft? I really have not really done too much homework on it yet, but to me, that seems there's a lot of good young receivers coming out in this draft, as well as quarterbacks, and there's a lot of good young offensive linemen that's going to kind of put some good defensive players down the draft board. So I think some of these teams that are more established, that are more successful, are going to have a better than usual draft, because of some of those players are going to be pushed down to them that on the defensive side of the board. And I want to hear your take on it.
Agree with you, of course, on a lot of stuff. My biggest thing is what I don't want the Jacksonville Jaguars, even if I wasn't a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, this whole Trevor Lawrence thing seems to be fan driven. And my hope is that Urban Meyer and company make the right decision for the Jaguars and not Jaguar fans because we're stupid. Just point blank and simple. We are stupid, and I say that with all the respect to a grain of salt. But I think and I'll go to bat for this. I still am not convinced on Trevor Lawrence. I don't disrespect his tape. I don't see what everyone sees. What I do see, what I have seen, I should say, is Trevor Lawrence playing with 5-star athletes surrounding him, and he won't get that off the bat here in Jacksonville. Could he be great? Yes. Yeah, cool. If the thing about it is, our fans and so many people have Jacksonville in a win now mode, and you're looking for a savior. And that's been the problem in the draft before. When you drafted Blaine Gabbert, immediately you got rid of David Garrard. Like literally the next day. Because you were under the impression that Blaine Gabbert was your savior. When we put David Garrard in position, they got rid of Byron Leftwich. Literally the exact same day. Because we put Byron Leftwich in the spot and said we put David Garrard in the spot to say he is our savior. We did that with Blake Bortles, and we did that with Nick Foles. And I don't want people to get so caught up into the fact that this guy is the next coming of Jesus Christ, because he is not. Don't let the blonde hair confuse you, people. And so, I'll go to bat for this. Literally up until they turned the card in, I would not be mad if they drafted Devontae Smith with the first pick overall. And so, I'm not a believer that DJ Chark is a number one receiver. No one will be able to convince me of that. I believe he's a solid number two. And not because of, he's not good. Don't get it twisted. If anything, he's a number 1.5. But it's just because of the fact of right now, if the Jacksonville Jaguars were to play tomorrow, literally once they draft Trevor Lawrence, he snaps the ball, he better be praying. Because that's just how it is. And as I go down the board, I kind of penciled in a quarterback for the Jets, but we don't know what they're going to do with Sam Darnold. And then I go down the board to Miami, where most people have Devontae Smith going. I'm a little torn on that one as well, because Miami on the low end, outside of Buffalo, had a very, very good season there. Of course they ended up down there, but we saw the progress. And then we get down to Atlanta. Why is Matty Ice still in the league? I don't know. But my point is, if I'm a fan or a GM that's not working for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I will not leave my seat until they get picked, until they make their turn in their card. Because if we know the NFL draft, nothing is for certain until the commissioner says it.
I agree with you, but I'm gonna definitely go with you. If there is a receiver in this draft that drafted before Jamar Chase, I might throw up in my mouth, because no disrespect, he had a wonderful season, Devontae Smith. But Devontae Smith is not as good as Jamar Chase. I don't know if you forgot about last season and season before last, when LSU won the national championship and saw that young man play. And because when he opted out, I'm like, smart moves, man. You do not want to risk your. He was one of the best. Yes, Devontae Smith ran great routes. but he probably had to go work with him. It seemed like he went to work with Jamar Chase in the offseason to say, oh, man, how you run these routes? Because Jamar Chase runs just as crisp of routes, has wonderful hands, and even better speed. Jamar Chase is the number one rated receiver right now in this draft for a reason. Jamar Chase is
Number one
dynamic.
rated with who?
Huh?
Number one rated with who?
Did you watch Jamar Chase play?
Yeah, I watched the
Okay.
scrub play.
No, I
Notice
don't
what I
think.
just said.
I don't think so. I think we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. But Jamar Chase he's dynamic. DeVonta Smith, yes, he's good. And if that was the case, if DeVonta Smith was all of that as we thought he was, and he performed it, don't take nothing away from the young man. The young man performed, had a wonderful season, deserved the Heisman Trophy, clear-cut best college player far as the wide receiver position. I don't think he was even the best player in my position. I mean, the dynamic, because I mean, outside of his, being on probably the best team in the league. I mean, one of the most dominant players was just totally lost his name, with the tight end for the Florida Gators. I mean, a nightmare. He was just as dynamic of a nightmare. He just couldn't stay out. He couldn't stay out of the. He had a lot of injury issues, concussions, but nothing. Jamar Chase is just one of those prototypical wide receivers. He's a great, great wide receiver. He's going to have a wonderful NFL career, and I think he's going to be the top pick wide receiver. He's going to be the first wide receiver picked off the board. But I can pretty much know that the Jaguars, outside of trading for a veteran quarterback, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the number one pick. Will they come back and pick another offensive player? Who knows? There's a lot of different mocks for them right now, but we know Trevor Lawrence is going to be the pick for the Jaguars because they need a quarterback. There is no quarterback to move forward with going outside, getting a veteran quarterback, and he's the top prospect. Do you believe in him? Maybe not, but most everybody else does, and I think he's going to be the best guy out there for going forward. But we're gonna end this show right here because we don't want to get too much in the draft because we got way more stuff to talk about as we go forward. I want to appreciate all our fans listening, tuning in. I thank for everybody who hits me up and tells me about how they enjoy the show. Keep watching. Once again, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, and Terry McGriff Show. Once again, please just listen and call our vendors. Hit on them. She Car, Watch Game Film, Team Sports, Weather Red. Once again, shout out to my friends and business partner at Laces Out in the Women's Tackle Football League. And until next week, we want you guys to take care of each other. Stay safe out there. For my illustrious co-host, Andre L. Sullivan, my great producer. And I want to see you guys next week right here on the Terry McGriff Show. Have a good evening.